The humid air of Miami wrapped around Elena like an unfamiliar cloak, thick with the scent of salt water, sunscreen, and the faint tang of exhaust from the docks. Stepping off the plane, she adjusted the strap of her worn leather bag across her shoulder, feeling the weight of her life packed into a single carry-on. Coming from a small South American city, the sprawling skyline of Miami, glimmering under the late afternoon sun, felt like stepping into another world. Neon signs buzzed in the distance, palm trees swayed gently along the boulevards, and the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore mixed with the low hum of city life. The city pulsed with energy she could feel even in her chest, promising excitement, opportunity, and a subtle undercurrent of danger she could not yet define. She had arrived with little more than hope, determination, and a carefully folded resume. Her first days had been a blend of practical navigation, finding her small rented apartment, learning bus routes and deciphering English menus, and of mental preparation. Miami was glamorous, chaotic, and foreign. Every corner seemed to whisper promises of transformation, of a life far beyond what she had known. Yet beneath the sun-drenched facades of hotels, cafes, and luxury boutiques, she sensed that not everything was as bright and carefree as it seemed. Elena's job at the modest tourist agency offered her an entry point into this shimmering world. Initially, her tasks were simple: organizing hotel bookings, guiding tourists to the right taxis or buses, answering questions with a smile. Each day she learned more about the city's rhythm and her place within it. Tourists came and went like waves, each bringing their own expectations and demands, and each leaving behind a faint trace of aspiration and longing. Through them, she glimpsed the lives of those who thrived on Miami's edge, people whose wealth and influence were apparent in every gesture, every meticulously chosen piece of clothing, every glance and laugh that seemed rehearsed for effect. Her first real encounter with the city's hidden social currents came in the form of an invitation. A prestigious gala, hosted on a private yacht, promised not only luxury, but an opportunity to meet influential figures in Miami's booming tourist industry. The invitation arrived unexpectedly, delivered by her supervisor with a subtle but unmistakable emphasis on her potential. Elena accepted without hesitation, driven by a combination of ambition and curiosity. The yacht represented a threshold into a world she had only glimpsed from afar, a chance to prove herself, and perhaps to glimpse the subtle power games that shaped the city. When she arrived, the yacht floated gracefully against the backdrop of a fiery sunset. Its polished teak decks gleamed in the fading light, and stainless steel fittings reflected streaks of orange and gold. Guests moved about in crisp evening attire, champagne flutes sparkling in their hands. Laughter filled the air, light and melodious, yet with an underlying edge that suggested familiarity with the delicate balance of wealth and influence. Elena felt herself simultaneously awed and intimidated. The air seemed charged, as if every word, every smile, every glance carried hidden weight. As she carried trays of drinks and offered polite greetings, Eleanor observed carefully. She noticed how certain guests spoke with almost imperceptible signals, their expressions shifting in microseconds, conveying more than words could. Some discussions were veiled, each statement carefully constructed to hint at possibilities or obligations without revealing outright intentions. Elena realized she was not merely an observer. She was part of the setting, her presence noted by the sharp eyes of those accustomed to influence. She moved with care, mindful of each step, each smile, each nod. Inside, she wrestled with an intoxicating mixture of excitement and trepidation. Part of her thrilled at being so close to this world, the world she had imagined while traveling across cities and studying foreign magazines. Another part felt a whisper of unease, a sense that in this city, charm could be a mask, and trust a currency harder to earn than gold. The evening deepened, and Elena found herself drawn to a quiet corner near the yacht's railing. She gazed at the horizon, where the sun sank into the water in a molten haze of orange and pink. The gentle rocking of the yacht beneath her mirrored the tension inside her own chest. A man, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, approached and offered a courteous smile, a small bow of acknowledgement rather than introduction. He said nothing of importance, yet his presence alone carried a subtle gravity. Elena sensed that this encounter, like many others, would ripple through the days ahead in ways she could not yet anticipate. As the night wore on, Elena's awareness sharpened. She noticed fleeting moments of quiet exchanges behind drawn curtains, the way some guests whispered with deliberate pauses, the coded nods and gestures that seemed to carry a language entirely their own. Each observation became a small lesson, a mental map she began to draw of the intricate social terrain surrounding her. She understood that survival and success in this world depended not on brute strength or audacity alone, but on discretion, subtlety, and perception. By the end of the evening, Elena had earned more than casual admiration. A soft, almost imperceptible invitation lingered in her mind, a suggestion that her presence and abilities had been noted in ways beyond casual acknowledgement. It was an early hint that her path in Miami might extend far beyond the familiar corridors of tourist offices and glittering yachts. She was being drawn, however gently, into a web of influence, secrecy, and social maneuvering that would require her to navigate with care. Returning to her modest apartment late that night, she lingered at the window overlooking the glowing streets. Below, neon lights reflected off wet pavement from a brief evening drizzle, casting kaleidoscopic colors that danced across the cityscape. The city felt infinite, alive with possibility and mystery, a place where every choice could lead to opportunity or subtle peril. Elena inhaled the mingled scents of sea air and asphalt, anchoring herself in the moment. She whispered softly, almost as a promise to herself, "This is only the beginning." Sleep came fitfully, filled with fragmented visions of the yacht, the faces she had studied, the hints of unspoken deals, and the subtle tension that seemed to hover over the evening. In dreams, the city stretched and folded, a labyrinth of light and shadow, a puzzle she was eager yet cautious to solve. By the morning, she awoke with a new sense of purpose. Miami was no longer merely a city of opportunity. It was a living, breathing entity, demanding both observation and action. And Elena was ready to learn its rhythms, to play its games, and to discover just how far she could go without losing herself in the process. The morning sunlight spilled across Elena's small apartment like liquid gold, catching on the faded edges of the curtains and scattering across the worn wooden floorboards. The city outside hummed with life, distant car horns mingling with the cries of seagulls and the persistent rhythm of waves against the docks. Yet inside, Elena felt a quieter, more insistent pulse, a lingering echo of last night, a residue of glittering lights, hushed conversations, and fleeting glances aboard the yacht. Every detail replayed itself in her mind, the smooth, polished decks, the clink of champagne glasses, the faint perfume of jasmine and expensive cologne that seemed to hang in the air as a subtle signature of privilege. She had never imagined a city like this. In her hometown, streets carried a slower rhythm, the air less fragrant with possibility, less saturated with the subtle hierarchies that dictated every movement. Here, in Miami, power was a language spoken in gestures, in the tilt of a head, in the briefest glance, and Elena, just beginning to understand the grammar, was both exhilarated and terrified. She poured herself a cup of coffee, savouring the warmth, the bitter taste grounding her as her thoughts raced. At the agency, her supervisor greeted her with a casual nod that carried more weight than words could express. "I heard you handled yourself well last night," he said, voice low, careful, almost conspiratorial. "You have a presence, Elena. People notice when you move through a room like that." She smiled politely, careful to mask the thrill and the apprehension stirring within her. She had always been ambitious, but this was different. This was not just about doing her job well. It was about navigating a world layered with unspoken rules, subtle power plays, and the kind of attention that could elevate or entangle her in ways she could not yet predict. The following days passed, in a blur of errands, small victories, and continuous observation. Elena accompanied clients on yacht tours, meticulously coordinated luxury excursions, and learned to anticipate the desires of the city's elite. She began to notice patterns, the way a carefully chosen phrase could soften tension, the precise timing of gestures that conveyed deference or dominance, the rhythm of laughter that masked negotiation. Even the tourists themselves, oblivious to these subtleties, served as a kind of foil, a way for the elite to practice their intricate social dances. It was during one of these excursions that Elena's first real challenge arrived. She was assigned to assist a prominent socialite with hosting an intimate dinner aboard her yacht, an event that promised both opportunity and subtle tests. From the moment she stepped aboard, she sensed that nothing about this gathering would be ordinary. The yacht was a gleaming vessel of elegance, polished to perfection, its teak decks reflecting the amber glow of the setting sun. The socialite, a woman in her early 40s with perfectly coiffed hair and a smile that seemed to know secrets, introduced Elena with an air of approval that sent a thrill down her spine. The guests were carefully curated, each chosen not only for wealth, but for influence, connections, and social dexterity. Conversation flowed in layers, superficial pleasantries masking calculated exchanges, subtle negotiations, and fleeting power plays. Elena moved quietly among them, offering drinks, adjusting seating, and silently cataloguing every detail. She began to see patterns she had only vaguely understood before. The tilt of a shoulder, the precise phrasing of a compliment, the way a guest's eyes lingered just slightly longer on certain topics. Each action was deliberate, each reaction measured. A gentleman in a tailored navy suit approached the host with a hushed comment, his words almost inaudible, yet his gaze flicked toward Elena with a subtle acknowledgement. It was a fleeting moment, but she recognized its significance. She had become part of the event in a way she had not anticipated. Not merely an observer, but a participant, a witness whose presence was noted, catalogued, and perhaps even leveraged. Elena's role grew more complex as the night progressed. She was asked to carry messages discreetly, manage delicate timing, and facilitate conversations without drawing attention. Each task was a test in perception, patience, and intuition. She realized that while Miami's elite thrived on appearances of effortless charm, the real power lay in understanding the currents beneath the surface, knowing when to speak, when to remain silent, and when to act with subtlety that could shift the balance of a conversation or a relationship. Later that week, a more direct test arrived. A client, influential within both the agency and the social circles she was beginning to navigate, requested that Elena deliver a set of documents to a partner aboard another yacht. On paper, the task was simple, almost mundane. In reality, it was a rite of passage. The instructions were precise, the timing exact, and the expectation implicit, discretion above all else. Elena felt the familiar thrill of apprehension, a tension that sharpened her senses and heightened her awareness. She rehearsed the route through the marina, noting landmarks, the rhythm of foot traffic, the subtle cues that might betray any misstep. The evening of the delivery, the yacht gleamed against the twilight sky, the water reflecting its polished decks in 1,000 fractured shards of light. Elena approached with measured steps, the hum of the city fading behind the gentle lapping of waves. She handed over the documents with steady hands, meeting the recipient's eyes and noting the subtle nod that carried far more meaning than the words exchanged. It was a recognition of competence, a signal that she had passed an unspoken test. In that moment, Eleanor felt the first real stirrings of confidence, a sense that she was capable of navigating this delicate, dazzling, and occasionally treacherous world. Returning home that night, the city sprawled beneath her apartment like a living organism, its lights shimmering in a kaleidoscope of possibility. Elena allowed herself a rare moment of introspection. Miami was no longer just a city of sun and opportunity. It was a complex, breathing network of power, influence, and subtle manipulation. Every interaction carried weight, every glance a potential revelation. She felt herself adapting, learning to read the language of gestures and whispered suggestions, to anticipate the undercurrents of ambition and desire that flowed through the elite social networks. By the end of the week, Elena's role had subtly shifted. She was no longer merely an assistant. She had become a conduit, a presence capable of facilitating connections, conveying information discreetly, and acting with a careful balance of initiative and restraint. The realization was both empowering and intimidating. She understood that Miami demanded more than charm and diligence. It demanded intelligence, patience, and an ever-vigilant awareness of nuance. As she gazed out over the glowing city from her apartment window, Elena felt a mixture of excitement and resolve. She whispered to herself, affirming the quiet determination that had begun to take root, "I am learning. I am capable, and I will navigate this world on my own terms." The city's lights shimmered like a constellation of hidden promises, each one a challenge, an opportunity, a secret waiting to be understood. And for the first time, she felt a tenuous but undeniable sense of belonging, a feeling that, though delicate and fragile, marked the beginning of a journey that was distinctly, irrevocably hers. Elena awoke to the familiar symphony of Miami mornings, the distant hum of traffic along Biscayne Boulevard, the cries of seagulls over the marina, the soft splash of waves against the dock. The city lay stretched beneath her window like a living mosaic of lights, colors, and motion. Yet, despite the sun piercing through the thin curtains of her modest apartment, she felt the weight of the previous nights pressing on her mind, a weight both exhilarating and slightly oppressive. The yacht, the villa, the carefully curated guests, the subtle acknowledgements and whispered cues, they lingered like an invisible scent, shaping her awareness of the city and of her place within it. Her role at the agency had evolved rapidly. Tasks that once seemed ordinary now carried layers of significance. Elena was no longer just a guide or assistant. She had become an observer, a participant, and a subtle influencer within the social labyrinth of Miami's elite. Every smile, every gesture, every whispered remark now demanded her attention, her understanding, her intuition. She had learned that nothing here was accidental. Every action, from the tilt of a head to the choice of words, conveyed subtle power, allegiance, or challenge. That morning, her supervisor handed her a manila envelope with a faintly perfumed edge. "Eleanor," he said quietly, leaning close so only she could hear, "this isn't a simple task. You'll attend a gathering at a private waterfront villa. Watch, learn, and act with care. Observe the dynamics, note tensions and alliances, and trust your instincts. Are you ready?" Eleanor nodded, her pulse quickening. She was ready, not because she was fearless, but because she had begun to understand the stakes and the thrill of navigating them. The villa was breathtaking. Set along the waterfront, its white columns gleamed in the late afternoon sun. Manicured gardens stretched toward the water, dotted with sculptures and fountains that whispered wealth and taste. Luxury yachts lined the private dock, each a symbol of status and control. Guests arrived in limousines, their movements poised, their expressions carefully measured. Elena stepped onto the terrace, instantly feeling the invisible currents of observation and evaluation. Her duties were ostensibly simple: serve drinks, ensure comfort, and manage minor logistics. Yet every action carried weight. A misstep, a poorly timed greeting, a glance in the wrong direction, any could ripple subtly through the gathering. Eleanor quickly recognized the layered nature of the social environment. Casual chatter masked negotiations, laughter punctuated subtle challenges, and every gesture could carry hidden meaning. A tall man in a sharp navy suit approached the host, murmuring something under his breath, his eyes flicking toward Elena. The acknowledgement was nearly imperceptible, a fraction of a nod, a tightening of his lips, but she felt its weight. This was her first clear signal that she had been noticed not as a server, but as someone capable of perception, discretion, and subtle influence. She adjusted her posture, smiled politely, and moved gracefully through the guests, cataloguing every detail. The evening unfolded in a series of micro-dramas. In one corner, two women exchanged seemingly innocuous comments about an upcoming real estate project, yet the tension beneath their smiles suggested a test of loyalty, or perhaps an attempt to assert dominance. Elena noted the gestures: a hand brushing a necklace, a foot tapping ever so slightly, the arc of a glance. Each detail became a thread in the intricate web she was learning to read. At times, Elena felt exhilaration, a thrill born from understanding that she could navigate this environment, influence outcomes without overt action, and observe without being intrusive. At other times, she felt unease, a creeping awareness that mistakes could carry subtle consequences, reputations could shift invisibly, and alliances were fragile. She realized that this was a world where perception outweighed brute power, and intuition was more valuable than education or wealth alone. As the night deepened, her responsibilities expanded. She was asked to relay messages discreetly, coordinate the timing of introductions, and subtly guide conversations to prevent friction. Each task required careful judgment, attention to nuance, and patience. She began to anticipate reactions, predict micro-shifts in tone or posture, and subtly adjust her own behavior to maintain harmony. The villa, the guests, and even the night. Air itself seemed to pulse with lessons, each waiting for her to absorb and internalize. By midnight, the party had quieted. Guests either retired to private rooms or departed via yachts. Eleanor lingered on a terrace overlooking the moonlit water. The silver reflection of the moon on the waves seemed almost symbolic, a mirror to the duality of her life, part observer, part participant, balancing on the edge of understanding and influence. She allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. Miami was teaching her far more than etiquette. It was teaching her perception, subtlety, strategy, and patience, the tools necessary to survive and even thrive in a world governed by unspoken rules. The following week brought an assignment that tested her abilities more directly. Eleanor was tasked with coordinating a gala aboard one of the city's most luxurious yachts. Beyond logistics, she had to manage the delicate interplay of personalities, anticipate friction, subtly align alliances, and identify potential threats to the social equilibrium. The preparation consumed her days, inspecting the yacht, reviewing guest lists, memorizing seating arrangements, and rehearsing contingencies for any scenario. On the night of the gala, Elena stood at the entrance, observing arrivals. The guests, moved with practiced grace, their laughter polished, their glances loaded with intent. She noticed the small gestures, a hand brushing hair from a shoulder, a tilt of the head, the placement of a drink. Each motion carried subtle meaning. She catalogued the interactions, connecting threads between families, business partners, and rivals, building a mental map of influence and intention. Several moments tested her composure. A disagreement arose over the distribution of seating, subtle but tense. Eleanor mediated quietly, offering suggestions framed as casual observations, diffusing the situation without drawing attention to herself. Later, a whispered request to deliver a private note required her to navigate a maze of conversations, maintaining her calm, adjusting her tone, and moving with precise timing. Success brought a small but meaningful acknowledgement from the host, a nod that signified her growing role as a trusted observer and facilitator. By the end of the night, Elena's understanding had deepened. She had not only survived the event, but had subtly shaped it, her interventions unnoticed yet effective. She realized that her strength lay not in overt action, but in perception, anticipation, and restraint. Miami was no longer merely a city of opportunity. It was a living network of influence, a game of chess played with gestures, glances, and words, and she was beginning to learn the rules. Returning home in the early hours, she felt exhaustion mingled with exhilaration. The city's lights shimmered across the water, each one a symbol of hidden possibility. She whispered to herself, affirming the quiet strength she had begun to cultivate. I am learning. I am capable. I will navigate this world on my own terms. The night felt alive, charged with potential, and Eleanor finally understood that the path ahead, though complex and demanding, was hers to shape. The morning sunlight spilled over Miami, painting the city in hues of gold and amber that danced across the bay and glittered off the polished hulls of yachts docked along the marina. Eleanor sat at her small kitchen table, a cup of strong coffee cooling in her hand, and stared out at the city she had begun to understand and, in small ways, navigate. Yet today felt heavier. The note slipped under the agency door yesterday, brief, unsigned, precise, hung over her mind like a shadow. Attend tonight's gathering at Villa Solara. Observe, report. Discretion is paramount. Her pulse quickened as she considered the assignment. Unlike prior tasks, this one carried an implicit weight, an unspoken test. The villa's owner was known not merely for wealth, but for influence. Someone whose connections reached into every corner of Miami's elite circles. Elena understood that tonight she would not only serve and observe, she would enter a network of power where a misstep could echo far beyond the villa's terraces. She dressed carefully, selecting attire that was elegant but unobtrusive, a soft beige blouse, a fitted skirt that allowed movement without drawing attention, and simple jewelry that complemented rather than flaunted. As she adjusted her hair in the mirror, she reflected on the lessons of the past weeks: observation, patience, subtle influence. Tonight would be the first time she might need to exercise all of these simultaneously. Under scrutiny she could not predict. The journey to Villa Solara was brief but tense. Miami in the late afternoon shimmered with heat and motion. Cars honked, street vendors called, and the bay reflected the city's kaleidoscopic lights in fractured patterns. As she approached the villa's gates, uniformed attendants greeted her with polite indifference. The property was secluded, perched atop a private curve of Biscayne Bay. Its white columns gleamed in the sun, manicured gardens extended to the water, and luxury yachts bobbed at the private dock. The scene was one of effortless elegance and silent, almost imperceptible tension. Elena stepped onto the terrace and immediately felt the currents of observation and evaluation. Guests arrived in a procession of high-end vehicles, each movement practiced, each expression carefully curated. She noticed the subtle markers of social hierarchy, the tilt of a head, the choice of seating, the spacing of bodies in conversation. Nothing was accidental. Every gesture, every glance carried intention. She began to catalogue, in her mind, alliances and rivalries, testing her growing skill at reading these invisible threads. Her assigned duties were multi-layered. Ostensibly, she was to ensure comfort, serve drinks, and coordinate seating. Beneath the surface lay her true assignment: observe interactions, identify subtle conflicts, and report any tensions or opportunities. Eleanor felt the familiar thrill of challenge, tempered by an awareness of the stakes. This was no longer a matter of minor etiquette or basic discretion. Tonight, her perception and judgment would be measured against the reality of unspoken power. Within the first hour, tensions surfaced. Two prominent figures, a real estate developer and a socialite known for her strategic influence, exchanged polite words with an underlying current of rivalry. Eleanor noted every micro-gesture: a hand brushing against a glass, a subtle narrowing of the eyes, a slight pause before laughter. Each movement was a signal, a test, a probe of loyalty or ambition. Her notebook of mental observations expanded rapidly, threads of intention connecting in patterns she was only beginning to discern. A minor incident tested her instincts. A guest's drink was accidentally spilled near the entrance, threatening to disrupt the delicate flow of the gathering. Elena moved swiftly, discreetly offering assistance, redirecting the host's attention with tact. Her subtle intervention was acknowledged not through words, but through gestures: a slight nod, a careful glance, a soft smile. Influence, she realized, was exercised quietly, invisibly, through presence, timing, and perception rather than force. The night intensified when she received her first ethically ambiguous task. A confidant of the host handed her a note in near silence, instructing her to deliver it directly to another guest. The note's content was not overtly harmful, but it carried the potential to shift alliances subtly, creating tension or advantage depending on the recipient's response. Elena hesitated. Her role demanded discretion and compliance, yet the unease in her chest warned of potential consequences. She carefully weighed her options, recognizing the fine line between influence and manipulation. Choosing to deliver the note, she did so with measured composure, ensuring the recipient received it discreetly. The acknowledgement, a fleeting nod, a brief smile, confirmed her success. Relief mingled with unease. She realized that moral navigation was as critical as social observation. Each action had weight, and even discretion required judgment. Throughout the evening, Eleanor's observations deepened. She traced emerging alliances, detected rivalries, and mapped invisible hierarchies. Guests moved with deliberate grace, their gestures and tones loaded with significance. Elena catalogued subtle patterns: how laughter punctuated assertions, how glances signaled complicity or challenge, how physical distance conveyed status or deference. She began to predict behaviors, anticipate responses, and guide interactions quietly, maintaining harmony while gathering insight. Late into the night, a more direct test of judgment arose. A disagreement between two influential guests over seating arrangements threatened to escalate. Elena interjected with casual suggestions, phrased as neutral observations, carefully redirecting attention without drawing notice to herself. The tension dissipated, the flow of conversation resumed, and her subtle mediation earned an almost imperceptible acknowledgement from the host. It was proof that she could exercise influence invisibly, balancing ethics, discretion, and effectiveness. By midnight, the villa had quieted. Guests departed via yachts or luxury vehicles, the garden terraces emptying, fountains whispering softly under the moonlight. Elena lingered on a balcony, gazing at the bay. The city's lights shimmered across the water, a reflection of hidden networks, opportunities and perils. She understood, in a profound way, that Miami's elite operated in shadows. Appearances masked intentions. Trust was a fragile commodity, and influence was earned through subtlety, perception, and patience. Returning home in the early hours, she reflected on the night's lessons. She had navigated social currents, performed ethically ambiguous tasks, and exercised discretion under scrutiny. She had strengthened her observational skills and deepened her understanding of interpersonal dynamics. Yet she also realized the stakes had grown, influence was seductive, power was intoxicating, and the cost of misjudgment could be high. Elena whispered to herself as she closed the door to her apartment. "I am learning. I am capable, and I will continue to navigate this world carefully, with awareness and intention." The city sprawled before her, alive with challenge, opportunity, and hidden complexity. She felt exhilaration, responsibility, and the quiet certainty that her path, though fraught with ambiguity and risk, was hers to shape. Elena awoke to the soft glow of dawn creeping through the curtains of her small apartment. Miami's streets began to hum, a rhythmic blend of car engines, distant horns, and the faint slap of waves against the marina's docks. Today carried a weight unlike any she had encountered before. The note she received at the agency the previous day had been brief, its language curt yet precise. Attend the gala aboard the Odyssey. Observe, report, exercise discretion. Your judgment will be tested. Even as she dressed, selecting muted elegance over flamboyance, she felt the tension in her chest, a familiar yet more intense pulse of anticipation. Her previous experiences, the gatherings at Villa Solara, the subtle manipulations she had witnessed and performed, had sharpened her skills, yet tonight was different. The Odyssey was more than a yacht. It was a floating theatre of influence, where the city's elite would perform in carefully choreographed interactions, and any misstep could echo beyond the polished decks. The marina itself shimmered. Under the afternoon sun, the water reflecting yachts moored in perfect alignment like sentinels of power. Elena took a slow breath, letting her eyes scan the vessel. Its teak decks gleamed under the late sun, chrome fittings shone, and the gentle hum of engines created a quiet undercurrent. Guests arrived in black sedans and luxury cars, each step onto the gangway deliberate, each smile carefully curated. Elena noted small gestures, the tilt of a hat, the subtle sway of a dress, the handshake length, the micro-expressions flashing across faces. Once aboard, she moved carefully, an invisible observer amid the orchestrated elegance. Her duties were layered: serve drinks, coordinate seating, manage logistics. Yet beneath the veneer lay the true purpose. Observe the intricate web of relationships, identify emerging conflicts, and quietly influence outcomes without being noticed. Her senses were alert. Every glance, every shift in posture, every sigh was a signal, a thread in the network she was learning to navigate. The first hour brought subtle tests. A real estate magnate and a political consultant exchanged pleasantries that, on the surface, seemed harmless. But Elena noticed the slight hesitation in their smiles, the careful distancing of their bodies, the casual but deliberate placement of drinks on tables, a silent dialogue of power, expectation, and alliance. She catalogued every nuance, realizing that these micro-interactions were the foundation of the city's social structure. Soon she faced her first real moral test of the evening. A confidant of the host, discreetly handed her a folded note, intended for another guest. Its content could subtly shift alliances, offering advantage to one party while potentially damaging the reputation of another. Elena hesitated, considering her options. Compliance would maintain her discretion and favor with the host, yet conscience whispered caution. Even invisible influence carried consequences. After careful deliberation, she delivered the note with precise neutrality, ensuring privacy. The recipient's fleeting nod, almost imperceptible, confirmed success. Relief mixed with unease. She understood now that influence was inseparable from ethical ambiguity. Every decision carried ripples far beyond immediate perception. Hours passed with Elena deeply embedded in the yacht's social ecosystem. She observed rivalries, alliances, and the subtle hierarchy that determined every movement, word, and gesture. She traced the invisible pathways of influence, how laughter masked critique, how proximity signaled power, how the placement of a chair could assert dominance. Her mental map grew more intricate with each interaction, connecting threads of loyalty, ambition, and subtle tension. A heated debate arose mid-evening. Two influential guests argued quietly over the allocation of investment opportunities. Elena intervened subtly, redirecting attention with carefully phrased questions and neutral observations. The tension eased without breaking the decorum of the gathering. Her intervention went unnoticed by most, yet the host's brief, approving glance acknowledged her growing competence. Late into the night, Elena faced another ethical dilemma. A high-ranking guest, aligned with the host's inner circle, requested her assistance in a scheme that would manipulate a social competitor for strategic advantage. Elena weighed the implications. Refusal could jeopardize her credibility. Compliance risked entangling her in moral compromise. She chose a delicate balance, performing the task in a manner that preserved discretion while minimizing harm. The subtle nod of acknowledgement reassured her of success, yet the unease lingered, a reminder of the complex moral terrain she now navigated. Meanwhile, multiple parallel intrigues unfolded across the deck. A wealthy socialite whispered conspiratorial hints to a newcomer attempting to secure favor. Across the room, an older gentleman subtly challenged a younger magnate's claim to influence, testing loyalty and patience. Elena tracked each interaction, noting reactions, reading intentions, and silently shaping outcomes through timing, positioning, and suggestion. She became a conductor of silent symphonies, orchestrating subtle flows of influence without overt intervention. Throughout the evening, flashbacks surfaced. Moments from her past, childhood lessons in observation, experiences of adaptation and survival, provided her with instinctual guidance. She remembered the careful listening skills she had cultivated, the subtle mimicry that had allowed her to navigate unfamiliar social environments, and the patience that had kept her alive in tense situations. These memories merged with her present observations, sharpening judgment and refining intuition. By midnight, the Odyssey had transformed into a delicate web of revealed and hidden intentions. Elena had managed complex social dynamics, mediated conflicts, and subtly influenced outcomes. Her understanding of power had deepened. Influence was invisible yet pervasive, trust was fragile, and moral responsibility was inseparable from discretion. The lessons were hard-won but invaluable. As she gazed over the moonlit water, reflecting the twinkling city lights like scattered jewels, Elena felt the simultaneous thrill and weight of knowledge. Miami's elite were players in a theater of influence, but she had begun to understand the script, the timing, and her own role within it. Whispering to herself, she affirmed, "I am learning. I am capable. I will navigate this world with care, perception, and intention." The night stretched before her as a tapestry of hidden connections, unseen motivations, and silent power. Elena understood that her journey had only begun, that each decision, each observation, each ethical choice would define not just her place among the elite, but her own moral compass. The city glimmered beneath her, alive, challenging and brimming with possibilities, and she was ready to walk its intricate paths. The Miami night unfurled like a living tapestry, every street, pier and marina shimmering with the neon glow of city lights reflecting on the restless waters of Biscayne Bay. Elena's apartment perched above the marina offered a vantage point. She had grown to cherish a silent observatory from which she could map the rhythms of the city. The past weeks had honed her senses. The villa gatherings, yacht soirees and masked dinners had sharpened her perception, her instincts and her understanding of the unspoken rules that governed Miami's elite. But tonight promised a crucible. A confidential invitation had arrived at the agency that afternoon, a masquerade gala at a secluded estate designed to gather the most powerful figures in the city. Its note was brief, deliberate, and unsettling. You will be observed as much as you observe. Your choices tonight will have consequences. Elena felt the familiar thrill of challenge, tinged with apprehension. She understood that tonight her skill, discretion, and moral judgment would be tested like never before. Dressing carefully, she selected a deep emerald gown that shimmered subtly in the light, paired with minimalist jewelry that spoke of elegance without ostentation. Every detail mattered, every fold, every accessory, every hint of perfume. Her reflection reminded her of the balance she had cultivated, alertness, poise, and an awareness that even the smallest gesture could carry meaning in this world of hidden motives and silent power. The journey to the estate was punctuated by the sounds of the city, car horns, the faint hum of distant music, the slap of waves against the docks. The streets of Miami were alive with energy, each passerby a story, each light a signpost in a city that never truly slept. Elena's mind catalogued the passing details, every reflection of neon on chrome, every subtle body language she glimpsed from her cab window. These were lessons as real as any she would face inside the estate's gates. Arriving, she found the estate heavily guarded yet elegant. Lanterns cast a warm glow across manicured gardens, their light glinting off statues and fountains. Valets ushered guests to the entrance. The faint strains of classical music drifted into the night air, punctuated by laughter and muted conversations. Inside, masked figures moved with practiced grace, their costumes and accessories signaling status, alliances, and subtle challenges. Elena immediately sensed the invisible currents of tension and influence, the silent tests of observation and discretion. From the moment she stepped into the grand hall, she was hyper-aware. Every gesture, glance, and posture carried meaning. She catalogued movements with precision, the tilt of a hand, the curl of a smile, the measured pacing of a conversation. Each micro-expression was a signal, every subtle shift a clue to alliances or rivalries. The entire gathering unfolded like a living chessboard, each participant a piece moving strategically in relation to the others. Within the first hour, Elena faced immediate challenges. A masked gentleman, his eyes sharp and calculating, approached her casually. "You're new to this circle," he said, voice low, almost playful. "Tell me, do you observe, or do you merely exist in the room?" Eleanor's pulse quickened, but she maintained composure. Her answer was carefully neutral, offering nothing yet suggesting insight. The man's smirk, a fleeting acknowledgement of her response, confirmed that she had been noticed, but not yet fully tested. Throughout the evening, parallel intrigues began to unfold. Two powerful socialites subtly maneuvered around a wealthy developer, their laughter masking strategic probing. A political aspirant was tested for loyalty by a hidden financier, while a young entrepreneur sought favor with subtle gestures and carefully timed compliments. Elena tracked every nuance, reading micro-expressions, positioning and tone, building a mental map that stretched across the entire room. Her first ethical dilemma arrived as a note was discreetly handed to her by a host's trusted intermediary. Its contents were sensitive, capable of shifting alliances or subtly undermining one of the guests. Elena paused, aware of the stakes. Compliance would maintain her position, but the moral ambiguity pressed on her conscience. After careful deliberation, she delivered the note in a way that preserved discretion while minimizing potential harm, ensuring the recipient received it privately. The acknowledgement, a subtle nod, confirmed success, but a shadow of unease lingered. Hours passed and tensions escalated. A whispered argument between two influential guests over a lucrative property deal threatened to erupt into visible conflict. Elena, sensing the impending rupture, intervened with a carefully crafted redirection, framing her words as neutral observation rather than intervention. The immediate danger subsided, though the underlying tension remained, a reminder that influence was as much about timing and perception as it was about action. Meanwhile, the night's web of intrigue grew more complex. A wealthy socialite subtly manipulated a newcomer, testing his loyalty to a powerful financier. Across the hall, a senior political advisor challenged a rising star's credibility with veiled insinuations, observing reactions with a calculating gaze. Elena observed silently, her mind cataloguing alliances, noting vulnerabilities, and predicting potential outcomes. She became an invisible conductor of a symphony of power, guiding interactions with subtlety, patience, and precision. Flashbacks punctuated her observations. Memories of her childhood, lessons in observation, survival, and adaptation surfaced, reminding her of the instincts that had allowed her to navigate complex social environments before. She recalled her first lessons in reading body language, noting inconsistencies between words and gestures. These memories merged seamlessly with her present understanding, enhancing her judgment and guiding her interventions. By midnight, the gala reached a crescendo of tension. A heated confrontation between two masked guests, powerful figures whose rivalry had simmered for weeks, threatened to unravel the host's carefully curated balance. Elena's instincts guided her. She moved through the crowd, framing interventions as neutral commentary, redirecting attention with precision. The conflict diffused, yet subtle undercurrents of tension lingered, weaving a complex tapestry of alliances and rivalries. As the final hours approached, Eleanor's mind raced. She had managed ethical dilemmas, navigated competing interests, and subtly influenced outcomes without revealing her hand. The cumulative weight of observation, discretion, and moral judgment pressed upon her. Yet she remained poised, aware that her role had grown from mere observer to active participant in an intricate dance of power. When the gala concluded, Eleanor stepped onto the balcony overlooking the bay. Moonlight shimmered across the water, casting reflections of Miami's lights like scattered jewels. She reflected on the night's lessons. Power was invisible but pervasive, trust was fragile, and ethical judgment was inseparable from discretion. Whispering to herself, she affirmed, "I am learning, I am capable, I will navigate this world with care, awareness, and moral discernment." The city sprawled before her, alive with hidden motives, unspoken alliances, and silent power. Elena understood that her path would be tested repeatedly, each decision shaping not only her position, but her own moral compass. For the first time, she felt a quiet certainty. She was ready to face the shadows, to act with both skill and conscience, and to claim her place in a world that measured power in whispers and glances rather than overt displays. The first glow of Miami dawn barely touched the horizon as Elena awoke, muscles taut from the anticipation of the night ahead. For weeks, every gathering, Villa Solara, the Odyssey, the Masquerade Gala, had been preparing her for this moment. The final event was to take place at an exclusive penthouse atop one of the city's tallest towers, a venue known for its breathtaking views and for bringing together figures whose influence extended into business, politics, and clandestine networks. The invitation had been terse. Tonight, all lines converge. Observe carefully. Trust is a luxury. Dressing with deliberate care, she selected a sleek midnight blue gown that caught the light with subtle shimmer. Every accessory, every fold, every trace of her presence had to convey neutrality, competence, and discretion. In her mind, she ran through scenarios, every conflict she had witnessed, every note delivered, every subtle intervention had been a rehearsal for this convergence. She sipped her coffee slowly, centering herself, knowing the night would test not just skill, but endurance and moral judgment. Arriving at the tower, she was immediately aware of the stakes. Security was tight, subtle, but exacting. Guests arrived, with purpose, each step measured, each expression curated. The panoramic windows revealed Miami sprawled below, a city of lights, shadows, and hidden connections. Elena's gaze swept the room, mentally cataloguing attendees. Familiar faces from previous events, masked alliances, and new figures whose presence suggested undiscovered influence. From the outset, tension was palpable. Conversations were layered, with hidden meanings, laughter often a mask for challenge or subtle negotiation. Elena noted every micro-gesture, a fingertip brushing a glass, the tilt of a mask, the cadence of a greeting, the positioning of a body in relation to others. Every detail was a thread in the intricate web she had been mapping, threads now converging into a single, observable network. Within the first hour, she faced direct tests. A prominent financier approached her, curiosity veiled as casual inquiry. "And what brings you to this gathering? Observation or curiosity?" Elena responded with measured neutrality, allowing no hint of uncertainty to betray her awareness. The brief smirk and subtle nod she received confirmed she had passed the test, but more challenges lay ahead. The night quickly escalated. Hidden rivalries surfaced. Subtle negotiations over property, influence, and political favor were performed, with precise gestures and understated speech. Elena's role was multifaceted: serve, observe, and intervene discreetly. At one point, a heated debate over a real estate acquisition threatened to spill into visible conflict. Elena interjected through carefully placed comments, neutral in tone but strategically guiding focus, diffusing immediate tension without revealing her influence. Simultaneously, multiple clandestine interactions occurred across the room: whispered exchanges, discreet note-passing, coded gestures. Elena tracked each interaction, assessing potential outcomes, determining where her subtle influence could maintain equilibrium or prevent damage. Her past experiences, the Villa Solara gatherings, the Odyssey yacht, and previous masquerades, provided instinctive guidance, yet the complexity tonight surpassed anything she had faced. A pivotal moment arose when she was handed sensitive information by a trusted intermediary. The content could disrupt alliances and expose hidden deals if mismanaged. Elena paused, weighing her options. Every choice had consequences. Compliance preserved trust and position, yet risked ethical compromise. She delivered the information, with surgical precision, minimizing potential fallout while maintaining discretion. The nod of acknowledgement from the intermediary reassured her of success, yet the moral weight lingered, a tangible reminder that every action in this network, of shadows carried ripples far beyond immediate perception. Hours into the night, threats became more immediate. A masked figure from a rival faction approached her subtly, questioning her presence with an intensity that hinted at knowledge of her previous interventions. Elena maintained composure, using subtle deflection and observation to navigate the encounter. Every gesture, every word, every glance became a calculated tool, balancing discretion with safety, perception with influence. As the evening advanced, convergences became evident. Alliances previously hidden were revealed through micro-expressions, whispered warnings, and strategic positioning. Rivalries simmered beneath polite smiles, and subtle manipulations were exposed through the reactions they provoked. Elena carefully maneuvered between these currents, guiding outcomes invisibly, ensuring equilibrium while remaining ethically aware. Flashbacks punctuated her strategy. Memories of her upbringing, her early experiences observing human behavior, and her adaptive skills under stress provided her with instinctive guidance. Each recollection merged with present observations, enhancing decision-making and sharpening her ability to navigate morally ambiguous terrain. She realized that her survival and growth depended not only on observation, but on the synthesis of insight, ethics, and strategic action. Midnight approached. The convergence reached its apex. A confrontation among the city's most influential figures threatened to fracture alliances, exposing deals and ambitions long hidden. Elena's interventions became critical. She navigated the room with precision, framing comments as casual observations, strategically redirecting attention, and subtly balancing power dynamics. The conflict diffused without overt disruption, though tensions remained palpable, a reminder of the delicate nature of influence and trust. By the final hours, Eleanor had orchestrated a web of discreet interventions, ethical decisions, and strategic observations that preserved equilibrium while safeguarding her own position. She had navigated moral ambiguity, psychological pressure, and social complexity, emerging with clarity and resilience. Observing Miami's skyline from the penthouse balcony, she understood the lesson of the convergence. Influence was silent but pervasive, trust fragile, and moral integrity essential in a world where appearances masked intent. As the city's lights reflected on Biscayne Bay, Elena whispered to herself, "I am capable, I am discerning. I will navigate this world with awareness, skill, and conscience." She had faced the shadows of power, survived the convergence of hidden intentions, and grown into her own strength. The network of Miami's elite was intricate and perilous, yet she had learned to move within it with both strategy and integrity. The night stretched infinitely, alive with possibilities, challenges, and hidden currents. Eleanor had reached the edge of deception and crossed it with wisdom, courage, and discernment. The path ahead would continue to test her, but she was ready, resilient, perceptive, and morally grounded, prepared to act with both skill and conscience as she shaped her place in the world of shadows.